Useless old man. That's what my own son shouted at me on my 75th birthday, in front of the whole family just because I spilled a little juice on his new shirt. My name is Joseph Miller, and those two words hurt me more than all the blows life had dealt me combined. But what I did the next day, that changed everything forever. Imagine the scene. There I was, sitting at the head of my own table, watching my children and grandchildren barely glance at me as they devoured the cake I paid for myself. 60 years working in construction, my hands were worn out, my back was aching, all to give them what I never had. And now I'm the family's burden. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button so this story can reach more people who need to hear it. My son, David, the same one I carried in my arms when he was sick at 3 years old, that same David looked at me with disgust when I asked him to pass me a soda. "Can't you serve yourself, old man?" he snapped. And when the glass slipped from my trembling hands, that's when he exploded. "Useless old man, always the same with you. You can't even hold a glass." The words came out like bullets, and each one lodged itself in my chest. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, chuckled softly. My grandchildren didn't even look up from their phones. My daughter Anne just sighed, as if I were just another annoyance. There, in my own home, on my birthday, I became the family laughingstock. But something ignited within me that night. I stayed awake until 3 a.m., sitting in my usual chair, looking at photos of when they were kids, when they called me Daddy with love, when I was their hero. And I made a decision that would change everything. The next day, bright and early, I went to the bank. I had something my children didn't know about, something I'd kept secret for years. I had exactly $350,000 in an account they didn't even know existed. Oh, you must be thinking, "How is that, Mr. Miller? You've always been a construction worker." Well, my friend, life teaches you that not everything is as it seems. When Eleanor, my wife, died 15 years ago, I met a construction entrepreneur who offered me a partnership in a small contracting company. I started by investing just $5,000 I had saved. For 10 years, I reinvested everything I earned. My children thought I lived only on my retirement, but what they didn't know was that I owned 40% of a company worth almost $1 million. While they saw me as the poor grandpa, I was building an estate they couldn't even imagine. But let me tell you how I got to this point. I need to go back in time a bit for you to understand this whole story. Joseph Miller wasn't always a man with trembling hands. There was a time when these hands built houses, raised walls. I was 22 when I married Eleanor, the most beautiful woman in Eastwood Heights. She chose me because she said I had hands of gold and a giant heart. When David was born, I cried like a child. I promised him he would never lack anything, and I kept that promise. I worked Monday to Friday in construction. On Saturdays I did odd jobs. Sundays I sold popcorn at church with Eleanor. Every cent went home, for food, for the children's shoes. When Anne was born, things got tighter. I enrolled in an evening course to operate heavy machinery. I'd get home at 11 p.m. dead tired, but Eleanor would have hot food for me, and David would be running to hug my legs, shouting, "Daddy!" The hardest years were when Eleanor got sick. Stomach cancer. I sold my tools, pawned everything, borrowed money, but I took her to a private hospital. For 8 months I worked during the day and stayed with her at the hospital at night. Eleanor fought like a warrior, but the cancer was stronger. She died holding my hand, telling me to take good care of our children, and I managed to raise David and Anne, being both a father and a mother at the same time. David promised he would help me when he grew up. Anne would hug me every night, saying, "I love you, Daddy." Both finished high school. David became an administrator, Anne an accountant. I didn't even finish elementary school, but my children were well educated. Do you know how they repaid me for a lifetime of sacrifices? By turning me into the family's useless old man. Neglect doesn't hit you all at once, you know? It's like a slow leak in the wall. It starts small and spreads until everything rots. When I retired at 65, at first it seemed normal. David married Sarah, they had my grandchildren, Alex and Sophia. Anne married Robert, they lived in Springfield. I felt proud. But Sunday visits dwindled, from every week to bi-weekly, then monthly, then only on special occasions. "We just have so many things to do, Dad." Always a new excuse. Anne stopped calling every night. Sorry I didn't call, Dad, but Robert came home late. There was always something more important than calling her father. What hurt the most was finding out from neighbors that they had gone to parties without telling me. Mr. Miller, weren't you at the barbecue yesterday? What barbecue? My own family forgot I existed. My grandchildren's birthdays became torture. I'd arrive with an expensive gift, they'd seat me in a corner, and that was it. The grandchildren barely greeted me. Alex once told me, "Grandpa, why do you always smell like medicine?" To him, I was just the grandpa who smelled weird. The last straw was on Mother's Day last year. Anne organized lunch at a restaurant. They seated me at a separate small table, as if I were a stranger. Throughout the meal, they talked about their jobs, their plans, their problems, but no one asked how I was. I was the ghost at the table, the decorative grandpa, so no one could accuse them of completely abandoning me. That night, I cried for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. I realized I had become a burden to my own children, but they didn't know that old Joseph still had some tricks up my sleeve. Going back to that morning at the bank, I left with $350,000 in a grocery bag, as if I were just buying vegetables. I got on the bus heading downtown and remembered Eleanor's words. "Joseph, never let anyone make you feel less than your worth." First stop, Hope Haven Orphanage. Director Evans almost fainted when I placed $120,000 in her hand. "This is so the children have everything they need this year." Second stop, Seniors Village Retirement Home, where my old construction buddy died alone. I left $100,000 to sponsor treatment for 15 seniors for a year. Third stop, Mrs. Rodriguez's house, who used to sell me lunches at the construction site. I put $130,000 on her kitchen table. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you treated me with more kindness in 5 years than my children have in the last 10. This money is to make your bakery dream come true." When I got home, I didn't have a penny of those savings left, but I had my dignity back. The real test came that night. David called me at 8:30 p.m., but it wasn't the David who had shouted at me. It was a sweet, self-serving David. "Dad, I called to apologize. Look, I heard you've been carrying a lot of money lately." Mrs. Rodriguez, in her excitement, had told the whole neighborhood that Joseph had given her $130,000. Within 6 hours, everyone knew that poor Grandpa Joseph had hidden money. The next day, David showed up with Sarah and the grandchildren, all smiles. We came for breakfast, just like old times. Old times. He hadn't set foot in my house in 3 years. During breakfast, David got to the point. "Dad, how about living with us? And if you have savings, we could form a partnership." A partnership, after treating me like trash for years. Anne wasn't far behind. She invited me to dinner and told me about an unmissable investment that needed $200,000. The saddest part wasn't that they wanted my money. It was the act. Everyone pretending to be the loving family they never were when they thought I was poor. The final straw was seeing a video of Alex on the phone Anne gave me so we could stay in touch. He was laughing at me with his friends, making fun of me, imitating my walk. Look at my millionaire grandpa who pretended to be poor. Seeing that was like a slap of reality. My whole family saw me as a foolish old man who pretended to be poor. In their minds, I was to blame for everything. That morning, sitting in my chair, I had absolute clarity. My children didn't want me. They never wanted me as a person, only as a provider. When I stopped being useful for that, I stopped existing to them. But I was no longer the naive Joseph. I was the Joseph who had seen his grandson laughing at him. The Joseph who overheard his daughter-in-law planning how to manage my expenses. I sought out Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer. I told him everything and what I wanted to do. "Mr. Jenkins, are you sure? There's no turning back." "Mr. Jenkins, I've never been more certain." The plan was simple. Transfer everything to a foundation I would create, the Eleanor Miller Foundation, to provide scholarships for orphaned children and support retirement homes. Sell my house and buy a smaller one near the orphanage where I was already volunteering. Within a week, the papers were ready. But the most important thing was the letter I wrote to my children. Meanwhile, I discovered something incredible at the orphanage. There was a boy, Peter, 8 years old, who always sought my hand to walk. "Mr. Miller, are you going to be my grandpa?" Those words went deeper than all the fake, "I love you, Daddy," from the past few months. When Anne found out I was selling the house, she appeared furious. "Why didn't you consult us? This house has family memories." Family memories. She hadn't set foot here in 6 months. "Anne, this is my house. I decide what to do." "But we have rights." Rights. Not love, not concern. Rights. "You're right. You have a right to know. Everyone's coming for lunch on Sunday. I'll explain everything." Sunday came. I cooked feijoada just like Eleanor used to for special occasions. The last meal I would cook for my children. Everyone arrived dressed as if for a wedding, all smiles, acting like the perfect family. During lunch it was a party. David telling jokes, Sarah asking about my health, Anne saying she missed me. Pure acting. When we finished, I stood up. 15 days ago, David shouted, "Useless old man." That day I realized you no longer want me. You tolerate me out of obligation. I pulled the papers from the envelope. "These are documents for my stake in Miller and Associates Construction. 40% of a company worth almost $1 million. I also had $350,000 in savings. I had because I no longer do." Anne went pale. "What do you mean?" "I donated everything. $120,000 to the orphanage, $100,000 to the retirement home, $130,000 to Mrs. Rodriguez. And my share in the company now belongs to the Eleanor Miller Foundation. This house is sold. I'm going to live near the orphanage where I volunteer." David exploded. "Are you crazy? That money was for the family. You are my children, but I am no longer your father. Now I'm just the useless old man." I showed them Alex's video making fun of me. "This is what you think of me, a foolish old man who pretended to be poor." I handed them the letters. "Here is the whole truth of what happened in this family." One by one they stood up. Anne crying, Sarah cursing, the grandchildren embarrassed. David was the last. "This isn't over, useless old man." "You're right, David. It's going to be much better." 3 months later, my life changed completely. I moved into a small 2-bedroom house near the orphanage, with a little yard where I planted tomatoes. Now I wake up at 6 because I want to live. At 8, I arrive at the orphanage where 18 children greet me shouting, "Mr. Miller." Peter has become my grandson by heart. Every day we do homework together. There's Louise, 5 years old, who hugs me every morning. John, 12, who teaches me about cell phones. Hannah, 8, who draws me little cards. There are 18 children who give me more love in one day than I received from my family in the last 5 years. I met other volunteers abandoned by their children. Mr. Thompson, a retired accountant, became my best friend. We play dominoes every Thursday, and we go to Mass together. Mrs. Rodriguez opened Mrs. Rodriguez's Bakery and invites me for coffee every Friday. "Mr. Miller, you changed my life." As for my children, David tried to sue me, but the donations were legal. Anne came once crying, asking for forgiveness. "Anne, I forgive you because holding a grudge is bad for me, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. The grandchildren never sought me out. Alex doesn't even remember he has a grandpa, and that's okay. They lost the chance to know the true Joseph Miller. This 75-year-old Joseph, who found purpose after losing his family, is happier than the 50-year-old Joseph, who was killing myself working for those who didn't value him." Last week, we celebrated John's birthday. When it was time to blow out the candles, he loudly wished, "I want Mr. Miller to never leave because he's the best grandpa in the world." That's when I realized I had found what I'd been looking for my whole life. A family that loves me for who I am, not for what I have. A family that will never shout "useless old man" at me. Today I turned 76, exactly 1 year since that useless old man. But this birthday is different. The children threw a surprise party, a giant card. They sang happy birthday off-key, but full of love. Peter gave me a beautiful stone. "Grandpa Joseph, do you know what the most beautiful thing is? That I didn't have to ask you to want me." Exactly, Peter. I didn't have to beg for them to want me. I simply arrived, gave my time and heart, and received love multiplied by 1,000. Sitting in the backyard tonight, looking at the stars Eleanor and I used to watch, I realize life taught me at 75. It's never too late to start over. If you're listening to me, an old person abandoned by your family, know this: you are not useless. Your worth is not determined by those who supposedly should want you. It's determined by you, by the decisions you make. If your children abandoned you, look for other children in orphanages. If your grandchildren don't value you, find other grandchildren in retirement homes. If your blood family failed you, create a family by heart. And if you're young listening to this, don't make my children's mistakes. Value your parents while you have them. Time passes quickly, and one day you'll want to hug them, and they won't be here anymore. This is my story. The story of an old man who stopped being useless when he decided to stop seeking love where there was none and started giving where he was valued. And you who listened this far, tell me, did this story resonate with you? Have you experienced something similar? What city are you listening from? Tell me below, because I like to know that stories of old people like me can reach far, into hearts that understand it's never too late to start over. Have a good life, my friend. And remember, you are not useless. You are exactly what the world needs, in the right place where you should be.